prayer is the chief means of action that God has given his people. Now, we don't like this today because we have a bunch of people running around today and they say prayer doesn't work. And they say stuff like, well, if prayer worked, then, the hospitals would be empty. If prayer worked, nobody would ever have financial trouble. If prayer worked, tragedies wouldn't happen. And there's a mistaken idea of what prayer fundamentally is there. People think, and I suspect sometimes that Christians that are discouraged in prayer are not consciously thinking, but acting like this same thing. That the idea that prayer is about getting God to do stuff for me. And there's no problem with asking God to do stuff, right? No problem at all. But if you think that that's fundamentally what prayer is about, then you don't understand, I think that you don't understand relationships. Like I've illustrated this in the past with this idea that if my kids were to say to their friends, like, talking to my dad doesn't work. And then it's like, now explain yourself there. Explain yourself, Gwen. Why is that the case? Well, because when I ask him stuff, he doesn't always do what I say. It doesn't work. Do you see how absurd that is? Like, the only way to approach God like that is to approach God as an absolute narcissist. The expectation that if prayer works, for me to believe that prayer works, God has to answer my requests with an uncritical and unqualified yes every single time. And if he doesn't do that, if his answer is no, or not yet, or not until eternity, then we think that prayer hasn't worked. We don't understand. Because like with my kids, it's like, no, the point of talking to your daddy is to talk to your dad who loves you, who is absolutely for you, and who, because he is for you, is exactly why sometimes the answer is no. And sometimes, and it's like, I could give examples of why this is the case, like when God says no, and where it's really clear to us why it's no, we can see in hindsight later. And those are kind of the easy examples. What's really hard is when we really don't understand why it's no. We don't understand, like, God, I don't get what's the problem if you just said yes to this. Like, if you just said yes, like, things would be easier. I'd be probably more productive for you. I'd be able to get more done. Like, God, like, I'm like, help me help you, God. And we think that for prayer to work, it has to be that God always says yes, and that's not true. But prayer is one of the chief means of action that God has given us. We are to, when we don't know what to do, and even when we think we do know what to do, we are to pray.